What is going on, you guys? It's your boy, the Aspiring Simpleton here, and we are back with episode 56. Quit ruining my intro of the video game therapy series. Yeah, let's get right into it. I actually have a topic I want to try and delve into today. Hopefully, I can get on a string of thoughts that I think is interesting and work from it, but. The topic of discussion is that of effective accelerationism. There's some, I guess, highly important, quote unquote, VCs running around peddling this term, and I thought it was an interesting and perhaps flawed viewpoint that might seem like a good knee-jerk reaction to a lot of technological progress, although it's the opposite of the conclusions I've already come to before. But anyway, basically what it boils down to, which again I'm being reductive here if you are an advocate of effective accelerationism, but it's a lot of that technology will solve our problems kind of thinking. And it's like even if problems that we create, we will solve them with better technology. So, and inevitability is another important facet of this, that it's an inevitable thing. Inevitably, things will happen. Inevitably, we will progress. You know, like Facebook was inevitable. Nuclear power was inevitable. Everything is an inevitable truth. There's not like we can't go back kind of thing. And while I do kind of agree with a very generic Pandora's box look at this, in the sense that you're not going to, I suppose, take away computing technology and the internet from people. I think we have to ask ourselves, what is it that we're saying is inevitable? Because if we're saying that, because then in that view, you could also just say, well, climate change and the end of the world is inevitable too. So let's just embrace it. I think that's just kind of a really stupid, a really stupid way to look at what is otherwise a very complicated and difficult problem, right? It's just, though it's inevitable. That's not really, I think even getting into the reasons why you think it's inevitable still based off assumptions of you doing something, right? Your behavior. It's almost like you're acknowledging that you can't change your behavior, right? It's like if you're a drug addict and you're saying, well, inevitably I'm inevitably going to overdose and kill myself. It's like, well, you could stop. Like you're assuming that you can't change your behavior. And I realize that I'm asking more of the reason it doesn't seem like that is because you're asking an entire populace to change their behavior, right? Instead of just one person, right? Because it'd be kind of stupid to use it in the example that I just used, talking about a drug user stopping use, because you could rehab somebody and they could stop doing drugs, but you're asking an entire society to change their to stop using technology of some kind or something like that, and not all technology. I'm saying certain technologies that we view as bad, right? And you're saying it's impossible to change public behavior. Well, I agree with that wholeheartedly, only on the basis that if you look at advertising as a business, that is the business of changing public behavior based off of telling them what they want, right? So it's not like even the people that peddle this, effective accelerationist ideology are the ones that their entire companies are built off the backs of advertising. So it's obviously stupid in my view in that way, because it's like they're saying, oh, you can't change it, it's inevitable. People will continue to embrace technology. It's like, well, it's like saying advertise. You don't have to advertise. And advertising, we know, is effective at changing people's views and opinions on things, and yet we use that to sell stuff, right? We don't really advertise. I suppose even like get a good education, but we advertise selling people the education. So it's all about money, but there's not really advertisements for free stuff. You don't see advertisements for GIMP or for Linux because they aren't they're not making anybody money, but and that's why they're so I guess not known, is because they're not They're not peddled. But anyway, that's not really the argument that I wanted to get into. I think really I have a lot of problems with the effective acceleration argument. So the inevitability part of it is one thing I immediately kind of take exception to. I think saying that's inevitable is a really limited view of not only like the problem at hand, but also just humanity as a whole. You're assuming that people just are incapable of change. And it's like in that view, we would never been able to adopt a technology like the internet because we were incapable of changing our ways. It's like you can't believe in the inevitability of things. And let's suppose you only believe in the inevitability as it results to developing technology and not our usage of it, right? We're like impossible to change our behavior. Like where do you make that claim? I just think they're applying I'm just talking about people who subscribe to effective accelerationism. They apply, I'm going to die here. They apply their view of humanity's capabilities only in the way that favors them, in the sense that they can only develop technologies and they can't more responsibly use it or do anything like that. Anyway, so that's part of it. I also think it's just as, like, in terms of solving our problems, I think historically you might say, well, technology has been the solution to all of our problems historically, right? We didn't have enough food, so we invented agriculture and better manufacturing and yada yada yada. And while I guess it's fair to look at it that way, I think we're also facing a different like type of problem, period, than our ancestors. We're not, at least in Western worlds. I'm speaking in my view, in an area that is most technologically advanced. I suppose I can just say that America is probably at the forefront of technology adoption and innovation. I suppose it depends on what kind of technology you're talking about, but in general, I could use that as a starting point, or at least as a frame of reference to know what I'm talking about here. But most people here, even the ones that are complaining all the time about something, aren't like dying of starvation, and they're facing a meaninglessness crisis, or they're depressed, or they have problems that are completely unrelated to these, like, oh, what about poverty, or what about sickness or vaccines? It's like you can't just hide behind a positive thing that technology has done and then use that to justify everything else. And I think because technology has solved so many physical problems, it's easy just to point to those and say, oh, look what we did. We people aren't getting sick from polio, or people can, I don't know. But then we've manufactured the externality on that part is, which they won't deny, but they kind of bring it back to the vaccine argument. But they deny, oh, what about all this depression that's happening? Why are people less satisfied with their life now more than ever? And largely, I think we have technology to blame. I'm not sure you can make an argument that because we have better quality of life now than we ever had, that's why people are like, why else? I want to hear why you think that our people are more depressed now than ever. You think it's not due to technology? Do you think it's not due to the social implications of social media and how everything's moving online, how our jobs are becoming increasingly meaningless, where no one's really doing anything that they find meaningful, besides those who can, I don't know, delude themselves into thinking their job at some VC firm or some marketing agency is so important. But people are facing these problems that don't have mechanized solutions, right? Even say, oh, well, then you're going to have some automated therapist who's going to talk you through things. I just don't see more, faster, better, more expensive technology as the answer. I just threw more expensive in there as for dramatic effect, but technology is the answer to these deeper psychological and philosophical problems that people have. And I think that'll be the pervasive issue. People that are still starving to death and dying from diseases, sure, yes, your technology acceleration attitude will solve their problems, of course. But a lot of people that are arguing with you aren't the ones that are poverty stricken. They're the ones who are online all day, right, and don't have any real friends. They work a job that means nothing to them. They don't know why they get up in the morning. They suffer from problems that more technology and just throwing technology at the problem does not fix. And I can say that assuredly. I'm not, and at least the technology that comes about from this accelerationist attitude. 'Cause the other thing I think that they're neglecting is that you can't control what technology necessarily comes out of this accelerationist's rabbit hole, so to speak, right? So, while you might just think, oh, well, the internet solved all these communication problems, and you can list the technologies we've created and then justify why those have solved certain problems, but you don't know what technology comes about and what new problems it introduces. I think it at the very end of it, it just becomes a never-ending hamster wheel of problems that we create with new technology and then solve with revised technology, and then with that technology creates more problems. But I especially think that now that we're firmly, again, at least in the Western countries, America pretty much, we're firmly in this category of people find no meaning in their lives, people don't have fulfilling social relationships or romantic relationships, and people are suffering from being dissatisfied with their life and not knowing what the hell to do. And those are not problems that were solved by the printing press or for manufacturing. So I really think that's kind of the crux. And I think especially if we're looking at solutions here, why would your solution to more technology be any better than my solution, or not my solution, but a proposed solution of like just zero technology, right? Going full Ted Kaczynski, living in the woods. That in logical premise is just as effective as your strategy of just banking on technology. In my view, it's equally dumb to just think that all your problems are going to be solved if you go live in the woods, right? You'd arrive at the same kind of dumb conclusion if you just said, oh, all your problems are going to be solved, just invest in more technology, right? Dive in deeper, right? Buy 3 sets of VR goggles and spend all day in VR, right? Go crazy, invest all in Bitcoin. Now, obviously, I think it's hard to talk about effective acceleration without recognizing that a lot of these people are shitcoin people who peddle shitcoins. And a lot of them are non-technical, which makes it even more ironic. But so that's part of the reason why I think they have to peddle like this I don't know, very strong adoption of new technology at all costs. But even there's a lot of people that I'm sure align with the ideology who aren't shitcoiners, and who are just truly do it because they think it's a good philosophy to live by. But I honestly don't see where it is any more effective, at least on the surface, without thinking any deeper than like totally swearing off technology. Again, like full Ted Kaczynski in the woods kind of thing. Because honestly, it arrives at a lot of the same conclusions. But anyway, yeah, I think our problems aren't really physical anymore. And the other problem I have, and this is just more of a problem with even like, broader level, just free market economics. People just tend to either use like government regulation or free market economics as like two almost just scapegoats in the place of having actual arguments for things. And I think both of them fail at several levels. That you can't just point, say, oh, government regulation will take care of it, or oh, the free market will take care of it. The free market isn't the free market in the real world. I'm not talking about on a graph or a mathematical hypothesis here. Speaking in the real world, what we've observed in our I guess in our transient view of what has happened in the free market, it does not automatically destabilize imbalances, right? And it certainly isn't like you can't just blame the government as the reason why free market economic doesn't work. And on the same side of that coin, people that just say government regulation above all, the classic is like, well, what about the authoritarian regimes that kind of ruin this whole thing? And they say, well, if it was left to free market economics, or if it was left to just government, it's the free market economic mindset that ruins the government intervention. I think both of those are silly, right? Thinking that a all-powering centralized government is there to solve all problems is just as silly as saying no government, let's leave everything free market. Free market works. It's all supply and demand. And that's kind of a classic, I think, where it's a classic Dunning-Kruger thing, where you have just a little bit of information, you kind of see the supply and demand market for one thing, and all of a sudden you want to peddle these grandiose visions of what a world in a free market looks like. But as we've observed, neither of those absolutes work, right? The absolute power of governments corrupts absolutely, and we end up with these really shitty systems that nobody's happy in. and all this, unnecessary bloat. And then free markets, we just get, they're not like resistant to monopolies, right? I think they just kind of feed off each other. And maybe if we lived in a world where neither of those have ever existed, right? If no one could even conceptualize the idea of a free market or the idea of a government, perhaps in a vacuum, one of those would work. But the issue is we are never only going to have one over the other, and we have to have both. And if we have to have both, then neither absolute works. Does that make sense? So if we have to have some government and have to have some free market, we can never look at them in absolute terms and think, oh, if everything was a free market, it would work, or if everything was regulated by the government, it would work. And again, I said in theory, let's say if the idea of a government had never been conceptualized, and people lived and did everything through free market ideals, it's possible that your little mathematical back of napkin thing would work, right? But it doesn't. And we have to have one. We have to have both now at this point. There's not a way out of that. Not a way out of that rabbit hole. So I don't know. I just think it's really stupid. I think that acceleration or effective accelerationists that I'm bashing on here, they kind of subscribe way too much to this free market ideal, where it's like it'll solve all the problems, and even a lot of the times the examples and things that they cite are just Elon Musk and all the other kind of these tech billionaires that are all under antitrust law now, right? Supposedly free market people, but I suppose that's a separate argument entirely. It also kind of has its own, there's its own nuances with those large tech billionaires. It's a very nuanced discussion. I want to get into specific people and things with antitrust, but either way, it doesn't really work. Imbalances don't automatically shift out in this free market idea that seems to happen. So I don't know. Regulation often is ineffective, and trusting a free market is equally dumb, because that's never worked. Except for this one thing, or this bananas or something. Anyway. The other problem I have with it is just is back to the inevitability argument of it, in the sense that people think it's inevitable that this technological progress will happen. If I don't do it, someone else will. Such and such. But I think that's also just ignoring. That's almost like just subscribing to the predestination theory of it, which I've bashed on before, because it just gives you this auto excuse to just either do nothing or just do the shittiest thing possible. So in some cases, I think my original argument was against doing nothing, right? If you believe in predestination, you're more likely to just do nothing. And that's literally do nothing. That means not accomplish any goals, not set any goals, because you're going to if you do anyway, right? So it's inevitable that you were going to set these goals and do this regardless whether you did or not. It doesn't allow you to express any autonomy. In the same way, I think the effective accelerationists are using the inevitability factor as an excuse to make and do shitty things, right? If you say, well, we want to, I don't know, let's say the first person that did VR porn, for example, just as an example, they were probably, well, someone's going to do this. We, might as well be us. No, we didn't. I think viewing it that way, and of course, I'm not saying that isn't an example. Surely that's an inevitable thing, but especially with newer tech, not everything is inevitable, right? You have autonomy, and accepting that you don't have autonomy, and you could just, well, someone's going to do this, and I might as well do it, and be the first. No, I might as well. And especially since now that it's a lot of the technology that is quote unquote inevitable is all about manipulating and ruining the human psyche and crushing the attention economy. It's TikTok, but for whatever. It's don't hide behind this mask of inevitability it's not an argument that holds up to scrutiny of any kind. It's just your hypothesis on things, and your hypothesis is that it's not something you can directly disprove, right? Your hypothesis is that proving it in itself is an effort against its hypothesis. So it's you either have to the evidence for the hypothesis is the conclusion of the hypothesis. And so how am I supposed to? It's not possible to disprove that without just saying that the hypothesis is inaccurate. right? So there's not a, I don't know, it's kind of a really stupid argument to hide behind. I do think it's hiding behind the argument, because you're not making any clear claims or efforts towards what I would consider to be a real argument, right? But anyway, so I think it's a cope that if you're saying, oh, you can't be stopped, just because you think it can't be stopped, based on your hypothesis, doesn't mean that it's not an excuse to do it, right? To go through with it. I think you, for better or worse, should still strive to try and exercise your own autonomy, although that seems to be difficult for some people. But especially people who are buying into hype trains. Also, I mean, the other side of this effective acceleration argument, if you look back at all the human atrocities, right, things we've done, genocides, factory jobs in the early 1900s, nukes, for God's sakes, even some slavery, some systems of slavery to some extent. We can trace those back to developments in technology that were not in the best interest of people. And right, you can say, well, is it worth it, right? And I think that's also kind of a foolish argument to go down, and saying that, oh, slavery was worth it because we got all this stuff out of it. And again, I look at the stuff that we have out of it, and sure, well, I can't deny that vaccines are great, and it's nice that I didn't die of polio or something, but you can't hide behind that and ignore all the terrible things that happened. You can't ignore the fact that happened, right? Nukes happened because of the improvements in technology. So I don't think it's in any more of a I think it's kind of equally straw man territory if you look at the Ted Kaczynski reject it all and the Elon Musk fanboy accept it all kind of thing. So I don't know. I'm very critical of that part of it. So because I think a lot of, or pretty much all of human atrocities to some extent, can be traced back to developments in technology that were capitalized on by individuals or organizations, and then perverted in some way to create terrible things, right? Institutions of slavery, systems of exploiting people, instead of exploiting the systems themselves. I think that's really what good technology should be, is exploiting systems. So, for example, I think a good application of technology in a democratic sense, in the sense that it is allowing for people all over to use it, is like cryptography for privacy and anonymity. Cryptography, like a system that uses math, like it exploits the systems of math to allow us, unfettered protection against people knowing our identities. I think that is a good practical usage of technology. And so, but we're not exploiting people, right? I'm not pinning down some poor Indian boy to do math for me every time I cryptographically sign something, or I encrypt a message to somebody that, or something. That's not, I'm not exploiting people doing that. I'm exploiting systems, right? And I'm not even taking anyone's job. It was no one's job to ever write hand-by-hand encryption certificates. Would be a ridiculous occupation that has never existed, thankfully. But it'd be different if I was exploiting people every time. If every time I used as an encryption key, at somebody's leg got chopped off, or somebody didn't get a meal or something like that. I don't know. But I think we should exploit systems instead of, and not technology. Don't exploit the technology, because often that's just an extension above people, but the systems, and I think there's a lot of nuance in what systems you can and can't exploit. Again, I think cryptography being an example of something that you could exploit, right? You can exploit the usage of cryptography for, things like security, period, right? We even use that for all of our internet connections, to use encryption to do that. And you're not hurting anybody by doing that, but I don't know. So I suppose if the answer, this is kind of backing up a little bit to an earlier point, as with free market, kind of as pure libertarians, or I don't know, alt-right libertarians, or whoever on one side of the spectrum, and then I suppose the communist kind of collective government regulation rules all people on the other side. What's my answer? Where is it then? I don't think I think we kind of exist somewhere in the middle, because like I said, they both have to exist in some level. Otherwise, things are really bad. But things often seem bad enough in the middle too. So it's like, where's the answer? I don't know. Not really sure if it's anywhere in the middle. I don't think it's smack dab in the middle either. It just might be one of those things where it's give and take. But I don't know. I think this idea of collective control, right? Leveraging technology like encryption is an example of how things can be democratized. I think like the free software movement, not the open source movement, but the free software movement, I think is an example of things that exhibit both like free market economics and like this, not government regulation, but a self-regulation that I think is healthy. Because ultimately, if regulation of anything comes down to a person or a board, right? Oh, we have the board of regulation. It's to hell with it. It's gone. Okay. The moment there's like 10 people in suits all deciding the future of something, it's a disaster. But with free software, free and open source software, it's ultimately like, do people use this, right? People contribute and they use and they support with their money and their voice tools like GIMP because they work the best. And let's say there's another one that comes out that's free and open source and people like it better. And people start using that more. And so people are just, it's like, voting with your dollar, except you're actually doing something with it in the sense that people like there's elements to democratization and ubiquity that you don't see in government programs or welfare programs or free market type stuff, Silicon Valley. None of this stuff, it really abides by these properly, I think, by both ideals. And I think, I'm not saying everything should be like the free software movement. Now I just sound like some evangelist of the thing, but I honestly think it's a very, very effective, it kind of adopts, look, everyone has their own tools for things. And of course it's the prerequisite here is that you're able to use them. And it's like, if I wanted to make my own thing for my own version of GIMP that I thought was better, or if I thought GIMP was tyrannical for some reason, there's nothing stopping me from doing it myself and contributing to a project. And I'm sure there are some politics involved with like getting GitHub stars, and I'm sure there's a lot more politics with the actual like free software movement as an organization. But I'm not talking about the organization or the Free Software Foundation. I'm talking about like the ideological movement of free software, period, right? Where it's it's free isn't price, which is one good thing. At least some of them even aren't. Some of them are paid software, but it's free as in its usage, right? You can make any fork of it you want. You can contribute to different forks that you want. There's no requirement that you do anything. There's not like a centralized portal of crap that you don't have to go through anything to download GIMP, right? I can torrent it. And like torrenting technology, I think, is another way that is a good example of exploiting, again, like this a peer-to-peer protocol that we can exchange files and ideas and things that they don't rely on any centralized authority and are still subjected to free market. So there's even been like people adopt different protocols on the internet depending on what is good. Like if something, depending on improvements that are made. I can't cite specific historical examples only because I'm not a historian with this regard, but protocols change, right? I think if, peer-to-peer protocols have evolved over time. I'm sure if you look at the different things, some of them have been around for years, but it's because they work and they're good and they do everything they're supposed to do. In the moment, like a government doesn't own that. It doesn't become, tyrannical in some way and then we're forced to use it, right? You can just use a different protocol, right? So if I just decided one day, I just want to use Gemini instead of HTTP, like, and I got enough people to do that because it was better for some reason, which, might be, but the adoption thing would be hard. But let's say, I get all my friends to use it. There's no, actual hard limit on things, right? There's no laws against me using Gemini. There's no laws. And if I can make my own fork of it too, it'd be, it's kind of free territory. But I don't know. I just think those ideals, the philosophical ideals are ones that kind of fit the mold of what I think is the healthy balance between free market ideology and, big brother regulation on things. Because I don't think they're both bad in absolutes, right? I think free market ideals taken to the extreme is a really dumb. It's not dumb. It's a naive look, right? I think everyone their first time they are in economics class, they're like, oh man, if government just got out of the way, everything would be great. But then, again, you've thought about this for 5 minutes. Like, do you honestly think that you're going to come to the master conclusion after 5 minutes of thought and a half of an economics lecture? No. So, like, I think it's a very naive look. It's just this purely libertarian approach. But like I said, there are ideals in both, in both ways, in both, I guess, directions or ends of the spectrum that I think are interesting things to explore. But anyway, yeah, that's my kind of spiel on effective accelerationism, and it's an interesting philosophy, but it's ultimately one that is not super great. It's hijacked by big VCs and are make it easy to peddle crypto scams, I guess. But the underlying philosophy behind it is interesting because I am a technologist and I do view technology as a vector for solving a lot of problems. But I also know that with like Uncle Ben said, with great power comes great responsibility. And I don't think pressing on the gas pedal it's irresponsible, right? So no, is my answer. But anyway, yeah, let's move on to something else. I'm not going to go with that. I have an interesting, so I'm not a huge fan of bucket lists. I generally think a lot of times they're just, I don't know, very, very, I don't know, like normie and half-baked, and I'm not really ever really sure what they accomplish, honestly, except for give people really, really, it's just dumb things to keep themselves occupied. But I don't know. I don't want to be super anti bucket list, but I do think there are, I think some effective things that I might do, and this is what I'm going to be getting to in a second, is make like an anti bucket list. These are things that I most certainly want to do, and it's kind of almost comes from this idea. It does come from this idea of like reverse thinking, where it's like it's easier to say what sometimes it's easier to note what you don't want versus what you want. And like they say, perfection, I think, is once you've removed everything that you can, right? Instead of like perfection is like when you're done adding stuff, it's when you're done removing stuff is when you hit perfection. And that's just like I don't know, some normie quote about that. But like this, an anti-bucket list might be a good vector for getting at some interesting ideals and things that you want. Because ultimately, a bucket list is just trying to give you direction for your life. That's the whole point of it. I don't think I'm not sure why else you'd make a bucket list unless you're not looking for stuff to do or something to give you direction. So otherwise, what are you doing? Where are you going? Anyway, one thing on my actual so like the to-do bucket list instead of the anti-bucket list would be to successfully go an entire month without putting on a shirt or shoes or socks, presumably. I don't know. Maybe depending on where I am, if the weather gets colder or something, I might put on socks. But the point of this would be, okay, I have to go an entire month without wearing a shirt. What would this entail? Okay, well, what are the things I need to do that might require a shirt, right? It's okay, well, I suppose at this point I'd have to find a way to exercise or to work without a shirt, right? I think working from home is an easy way. I don't have to have a shirt on or shoes on to work from home. What about exercising, right? What about going out in public, right? It's okay, well, I either have to be somewhere where I can do this in public or do this discreetly or don't go outside. I mean, I don't know. There's different ways of doing this, but the idea is to not do it in a way that is, it's not like a challenge, right? Or like I'm to eat 40 hamburgers or something. I'm doing it as a testament. Say, okay, you need to go somewhere for a month where you're secluded. You can work on something. You can exercise. You can do all of that free from having a shirt and just in an area that's you're relaxed. Ultimately, how serious can you take somebody if they're not wearing a shirt? They don't have any shoes on, right? Like, when have you ever gotten yelled at by somebody in their bare feet? I mean, I don't know. Maybe your boss runs around with bare feet and can yell at people, but ultimately, if we're looking at a full month's worth of encounters, there's not much you could take serious without a shirt or shoes on. I also am just curious to see what it does, like skin-wise, because I do think that, I'm not saying that, like, oh, my skin is irritated with my shirt fabric. I wear very, very or like dry fitty stuff. So it's not like my skin's gonna see improvement. But I wonder if I like darkened up, you know what I mean? If I wasn't so like pasty, if I didn't wear a shirt for a whole month. And I presume I would, especially if I was going outside. But the point isn't really to get a sick tan either, although that would be kind of cool if I just, you know, spent the whole month getting a tan. But I think even just like being free from the boundary of clothes just sounds so hippie, but I don't know. I'd be curious to see what would happen. So that's just an item that I thought was interesting that I was going to put on my, I guess my to-do bucket list, not my not-to-do bucket list. There are plenty of things on my not-to-do bucket list, but I suppose I'll save those for another time. But yeah, go a whole month without a shirt or shoes. That just was an interesting, kind of made me think about some different things that I might want at some point in my life's configuration. But yeah, I don't know. Just an interesting side. I don't want to go any further on that. Here's something else. I'm going to take a drink of water. So a lot of people think, this isn't really a contrarian idea. Maybe it's a contrarian idea. I'm not sure. You can come to your own judgment. A lot of people think the hardest part about doing stuff, and I used to think this too, actually, almost honestly, until just like a week ago. The hardest part of projects and things is getting started, which I think for many people might be the case, actually. You know, so I don't want to discount this entirely, but perhaps for many people, the hardest part of any kind of project or thing they want to do is getting started. So it's like you want to run a marathon. The hardest part is like signing up for it, right? Or just like starting the training or designing the training or thinking about it or something, or just going to the website, right? And I don't know if I've just kind of eclipsed that portion of the difficulty of things, but I have no problem starting ridiculously ambitious projects on a whim, right? You know, if you asked me to, I'm not even sure. I would just start up in 5 minutes, right? Especially if it is an easy thing like signing up for a marathon. Like if I wanted to sign up for a marathon, I would just go to the website right now and sign up for a marathon immediately. Like it wouldn't take me, I wouldn't even blink. Maybe that's just like some, I don't know, philosophy I've kind of adapted, especially for stuff that you're, you know, dreading doing. It's not, you know, there's not really a better thing than just to grit your teeth and do it. But the hardest part for me, I've noticed at least as of late, is finishing and deciding when something is done. Because I have like, I don't know, probably a half a dozen or probably a dozen, honestly, either project ideas that I've started. These are like, even like just GitHub repositories I've made, lists I've made, basic things I've outlined. But like, even if I make progress on them, it's like, it's very, very difficult for me to decide when it's done or what being finished looks like or just to finish it, right? Even if it's like, I know what it is and I can see the finish line. It's like the equivalent of, maybe it's just the nature of the projects that I do and not necessarily anything else. It's the equivalent of wanting to run a marathon, signing up for the marathon, training for the marathon, and then running half of it. But then like, you're not quitting, you're stopped and you're just going to wait to finish. It's like, you know, but the difference is, I don't know how long this marathon is. I'm not sure. I could be running for years. And maybe I run a little bit every day and I'm still like running, I'm still doing the marathon, but I just don't know when do I say I've run the marathon, right? It's like making me run, but not telling me how long I've been running. I'll lose track of time and I don't know where to stop, right? I think I've noticed that the hardest part for me now is, when do I stop? What is the finish line? Like, when am I done? And being done with it and just like checking it off is where I get stuck, right? It's not, I can start a billion projects, but I need to actually finish them and check them off and be done with it. So I don't know. I'm trying this. I'm trying to give myself like just time blocks to be done with it, and then also trying to focus on one project at a time. So like I have like, I don't know, a bunch of different concurrent projects, but for the different areas of my life, I've tried. Like for example, this month I'm only allowing myself to work on one personal project. Right? I'm not letting myself do this nonsense where I have like 5 different things and I'm doing all this. So I'm working on one project this month, which by the way is my custom Arch Linux setup. So I just wanted to learn how to write, set up, and install Arch on this PC and make it my own instead of just forking somebody's crap. But that's my only thing I'm going to do this. I'm not allowing myself to do all the other personal projects I want to do this month because I'm having trouble finishing stuff. So I'm giving myself to the end of this month, which is like 2 weeks, and I'm basically that's when I'm finished, right? And I'm kind of like a little bit sprinting. And I realize the month's only half over, so I didn't really give myself that much time. But either way, I think it's helpful to give myself, this is when the marathon's going to end. It ends at the end of this month. And whatever I have this month needs to be the end of it, right? I need to have the documentation. If I want to make a video about it, that all needs to be done. But the end of the month is when that ends. So I don't know. I just found it to be an interesting tactic. And then next month I have another project that I'll do. It will be the bucketz blogs thing that I've mentioned before, but I'll mention it again. But just like my own basically little version of a Twitter feed, pretty much. Just almost snippets instead of these hour-long videos. It'd just be almost little tweet-like things and things that I want to put in there. Just things I want to document in writing, because as great as this documentation style is, it's a lot gets lost in these huge videos that I think should be more. I'd love to be able to not point people in that direction more, but to some extent maybe just say, I've talked about this, go look at this link here, and it's like a link to the actual thought instead of a link to this huge video or this half the time I'm talking about something else, and then at the end I sneak in a potentially meaningful bit of thing. But anyway, that's my project for next month. Either way, I've wanted to start that several times. Just in the past couple of days, I've opened my laptop that I'm gonna run the server on, and just like, but I've made myself not start it. I haven't, because I was like, no, I need to be doing the dot files for doing my Arch Linux setup first. That's my project for this month. That's all. I'm only giving myself 2 weeks to work on this, and I can revisit it later maybe. But either way, I want to give myself very, very specific and outlined time buckets to work on these different projects. And I do the same for other facets. So I can't really do it for school per se. I guess the homework deadlines kind of function that way. And that's kind of the reason I think that might have been the reason I came up with it, was because I realized homework, a lot of times I have an easier time just getting my homework done immediately because I know that I need to do it before this deadline anyway, versus like these personal projects, I could, the world would live on if I didn't make my my custom Arch setup. But I don't, my world would move on if I didn't do my homework. So I have an easier time getting my homework done. So I thought maybe I should just apply the same, kind of do it right now, or give myself a specific time period to do it ideology with my projects. So I suppose we'll see how that works. But either way, I don't know. It's interesting. So I'm kind of flipping the idea on its head that the hardest part of doing something is starting it, because for me, it's easy for me to start something. It's just hard to finish it. So I don't know. And that could just have come with the nature of the project I'm doing, or time or something. But I don't know. If I was running marathons, it'd probably be the hardest part is starting it, but I'm not. I'm doing other stuff. So anyway, yeah, let's see. The other thing that I think is an interesting thought is human validation, right? Especially with the rise in artificial agents, that their ability to deduce things are improving. So part of this comes off the advent of GPT-4V, which is GPT-4 Vision, which just means that it can now accept pictures and can use DALL-E to generate pictures. And I've played with it. Yes, I've played with it. And yes, it's impressive. Yes, I get it. But the interesting part was its reasoning ability. So it can now draw, emotions or suspected emotions out of images and pictures, and presumably do much more analysis, or much more accurate sentiment analysis than what we're normally used to seeing with these intelligent agents. So it got me thinking about verification, right? Because we do these, if you go to websites like these CAPTCHAs, you have, that's how we verify that they're human, right? They do some little puzzle that apparently the AI can't solve, but it's a constant battle, right? That's like just an arms race, really, to see who can either develop an agent that's smart enough to do the puzzles, or different ways now to verify that we're human. And I'm very curious to see what ends up happening with that, because I think at a certain point it'll be very, very difficult to verify that you're human. And the obvious answer is, we'll just use biometric security, like a fingerprint or a retina scan or something. But those are just as those are just as susceptible to artificial attacks, or not, I say attacks, but artificial processes as anything else, right? If you get a high enough definition picture of somebody, you could use that for retina scans and recognition. And especially the other issue with biometric security is that you have to accept a range of values to account for variability. Like your phone Face ID still works if you're sweaty or if you're tired or if you're smiling, or it doesn't only work if you're like stonewalled into one specific thing. And so it has to accept a range of different values. And even on like my brother's phone, my face works on his phone. So that gives you a sense of how, like, and we don't really look the same. I mean, we do enough, obviously, that my face works, but like it has to, biometric security logs have to accept a range of acceptable inputs, not one input, right? Even one fingerprint, it has to be able to get the side, other things. So you could, even if you had like, you could cut off somebody's hand and use that, but even just a picture, especially with how good cameras now are, if you got like an 8K picture of somebody's hand, in some way, you could probably use that to develop a fingerprint to use for a fingerprint scanner. Same with like retina scans for their eyes, or you could get a piece of their hair and validate their hair that way. So what are the ways of validation that are like, I don't know, that are, I guess protected from this? Is there any way that we can verify humans without? I'm not sure. Like, do we have to interview them every time they have to log onto a website, or is there a way to do this? I'm not sure. It's very, very interesting. It's a very, very interesting challenge, and I'm very curious to see where the great minds go, but what developments take place in this space. Because the CAPTCHAs now are still pretty easy and time consuming, but especially as the CAPTCHAs are going to have to get more sophisticated, and soon enough, I think humans themselves, will fail CAPTCHAs. Because in order to have a CAPTCHA for a website, it needs to be something that a human can't screw up. You can't assume that they know multivariable calculus. And even if they did, like a computer could still do that. But like the pictures and lining up the pictures and things, it'd be very, very difficult. I'm curious to see what other ways that people come up with trying to validate humans. Do we have to look at a picture and decide whether the person's happy or sad, which they can already do, right? I think I just mentioned that with GPT-4V. It can already sense the emotions and different things in pictures, right? It can it's not as stupid, right? It's getting to more impressive in that regard, at least in my view, than it has been before. So how do we verify that people are human? Maybe we just can, right? So what is a post-verification society or post-verification software look like, right? Because even they said, okay, we each have our own like specific cryptographic key or something that we can use to validate something. It's like, okay, well, how secure is that? Is that a physical, like, is it like a YubiKey that you carry around? And could I beat the shit out of you and take it from you? Could I copy it, right? How would I do that? Like, is there going to be a USB port everywhere where I have to jam my finger in, right? How do you? There are other ways to compromise that we haven't even thought of. So I don't know. It'd be very interesting to see where human verification goes, especially as our ability to model and to represent humans, at least through language and through I guess pictures now and through video. Pretty soon, I suppose as these things get better, I'd be curious to see how we try to validate humans. I'm sure it'll be the talk of some stupid startup who's going to have some grand idea to, I don't know, get a picture of everyone's nuts. Actually, they're already doing the thing where they're scanning everyone's eyeballs, thinking that will be sufficient for. They're using like the blockchain something or the other to scan people, and they're using that little orb thing to look it up. Look up like blockchain orb eyeball thing. It's like WorldCoin or something. I'm not sure. It's a complete sham in my view. It's cryptocurrencies probably. I don't think is the answer. It's something cryptographic related, but it will not be a shit coin with a public blockchain or with crappy security that could be hacked on a ThinkPad. But anyway, very, very interested to see what would happen there. So if you have any ideas on, I don't know, post AI human verification, I'd be curious to see. And even imperfect methods, what about methods that humans can't do, right? Again, like I said, I use a multivariable calculus example, but I'm sure there's humans that are, no offense to them, I hope these people don't exist, but they do. They're too dumb to be able to do the CAPTCHAs, right? Even the ones that are like, oh, point the arrow in the direction of the frog or something, and they'd be like, what? And they're not, they wouldn't be able to do those. So there's some balance between the lowest common denominator and I don't know, human verification. Maybe it's actually time then for like some kind of digital license plate. It's like you have to answer a question about, or you have to be smart enough to be able to answer these CAPTCHAs to use the internet. Otherwise, you literally can't use it because we have to assume you're a bot. So I don't know. It's weird to think that another way of phrasing this is that humans are becoming more and more like bots, and bots are becoming more and more like humans. We're just merging them together. So I am trying to be as human as possible. I'm not sure how I intend to do that, but my actions are purely human. My opinions are human, and I try to do that with everything. I don't know. I'm not sure exactly what that even means, but I think avoiding the inevitability of everyone being a bot is something that is important, not only for me but for you. But anyway, that'll be it this time. Thanks for watching, and yeah, peace out.